Welcome back, everybody. It is the Working Brother back at you with another talk. Yet again, we've got Matt Ehret. Matt, how you doing? Welcome back.
I'm good. Thank you, Working Brother. Always a pleasure.
It's good to see you. Good to have you back. It's refreshing always to get your updates. You being, actual professor, and knowing exactly what you talk about often leads to very serious jokes. This is a comedy show for everybody who might have forgot. If you're new here, hi, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. We've got a lot of interesting things. Both of us, it seems, have just woken up, so this might be a little bit slow to get off the bat. Matt, do you want to tell people what we're going to talk about, or do you want me to bring up the subject?
Oh, whatever you want. I don't really. We discussed how we would just improvise themes. So whatever you want to throw at me as maestro, you can toss it out.
The one thing that caught my attention, it was this post that you shared on your channel. Let me try and find that here somewhere. But the point is that one of your subscribers wrote to you and told you that he learned more economics with you than he did in everything else that he studied in his economical career.
Yeah, that was a cool message. I had to share it because he was actually a teacher, an economics professor. So to get a message like that, and who the hell am I, right? I have no academic training, so I really enjoyed that. And I guess he's just been following. I do a weekly show on Badlands Media called Breaking History, and he's just been following it, and so I think some of the points I was drawing out over the last few weeks regarding the systemic economic breakdown came from my studies of Lyndon LaRouche, who, as you know, I was involved. I was a volunteer with his organization for a number of years, and it was a really great learning process for me because LaRouche was a physical economist, and I think in many ways he pioneered a field of science of the study of physical economy.
Time out. Yeah. Two side notes. What's physical economy, and how do you feel about people like Andrei Martyanov, who believe that economics and political science are not sciences?
Oh, well, it depends on how you define the terms you're using, right? Like two people could use the same word and it just means something very different based on the assumptions that these two different people have about the way the universe
like Nazis?
Or reality is wired. Yeah,
like Nazis, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's a lot of people who, for example, get warm, fuzzy feelings because they see the Nazis in their mind as the great liberators of Europe who are trying to stop the evil Jewish bankers.
I was saying more along the lines of you Nazi, like like when they use it like that, it has no definition, basically,
Oh, just like an ad hominem. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, so yeah, if you treat economics the way it is popularly treated, and as I think as Martyanov is describing, it's hullabaloo, hocus pocus. There's nothing to it. It's just calculating the emotions measured by some scalar metric of margin calls, spot markets, futures markets, and mathematical formulas associated with probability theory to generate what people think, what the oracles that read the tea leaves call. Like that's why Alan Greenspan was called the Oracle, because he could read the tea leaves. He's one of the few high priests who could discern these complex, quantum mechanically derived probability theories that would extrapolate trends into what the next quarter and the next two quarters was going to look like. So it's hullabaloo garbage. But if you approach it from the standpoint that I just said, having followed and researched the writings of somebody like a Lyndon LaRouche, and he's not the only one by any measure. The definition of what economics is becomes much more physical. So at that point, it does become much more grounded in something you could qualify as, I would say, a science, because the first thing you're looking at is the people. You're saying, okay, well, we've got it at any given stage, a certain amount of people with a certain life expectancy, a certain quality of life, a certain amount of needs. The productive powers are measurable as far as how much food you need. Everybody needs water. We're biological organisms. If you don't maintain and improve upon the water management, sanitation, desalination systems, things are going to get tight, right? You're going to lower your population density, or the potential population density, and things will get tighter and tighter. If you encourage new discoveries, you apply new inventions to the productive process, then you can increase the potential, what they call the carrying capacity. That's what the ecologists call the how many people or how many members of a species can be sustained is the carrying capacity. Well, humans have that too, but ours is contingent upon our thoughts, like what ideas we fail to discover, or we do discover and then choose to willfully apply, that will either create new resources by discovering something new about the periodic table. Like, for example, the opening up of atomic power over a century ago, as the idea that there's a relationship between mass and energy. And if you understand some of the geometry of the atom, you can unlock and direct some of that dense energy towards doing productive work, hence civilian nuclear power. And that all of a sudden turns something like uranium, which had formerly been used for centuries purely for, tinting glass in like churches. That's what uranium's primary purpose was.
Really?
All of a sudden,
I had no idea about that. That's interesting.
Yeah, all of a sudden became this like new resource, and then we could start creating things like plutonium that we didn't even find naturally occurring as we began to process spent fuel. So, all of this is contingent again on whether we have the political ideas applied in the form of a citizenry that is informed enough to understand some of the fundamentals about life, and to judge from amongst themselves representatives who will represent the people, ideally in a situation where we're participating in some form of democracy of some sort, which unfortunately I guess we've come close to at different moments, but we've usually fallen far short because of this oligarchy. So LaRouche's approach to physical economy has been, okay, are you making decisions today that are increasing or decreasing the potential relative population density? If you're doing things that are building infrastructure the way China is, or the way we used to do things in the West before you and I were born, yeah, you're creating real value. So whatever the money is in circulation, whatever the markets are doing, are tied to investing in real things in the real world that bear real value because they sustain real life. And if the money is increasing, the money flow and the money behavior is allowed to increase, but detached from any productive process, which is atrophying, as we've had now for 50 years of globalization, well, you can know that that's negative value. That money has no claim to real scientific value and should thus be erased if need be. If you're in a crisis, the way they did in the Great Depression to get out of it, they had to just wipe out a whole bunch of debt claims. Yeah.
Things like the derivatives market, let's say, which futures markets.
It's a time bomb. It has no basis of existence. I would say 95% of the derivatives claims are worthless. They're meaningless. If you try to honor them, you will kill everybody. So it's designed to be a time bomb, diffuse and flush the time bomb. It shouldn't be honored, right? So that would be a common sense thing that very few people have the political courage to go there, though, in polite society.
It is the 9th of the 8th as we record this now. This Monday, we woke up to this. Two questions. One, do you think it was planned to overlap with an expected Iranian counter attack on Israel and so on, that thing, and then were they going to be like blame Iran, and then Iran did nothing, and then the stock market crashed anyway? Do you think there's a possibility of that? And number two, why Japan, and how do you think it played through all the way to the West and South
Great
Korea,
questions,
from what I understand?
Yeah. I'll speculate. I have no idea, though.
Obviously, this is a comedy show. This is a comedy show. We're just making jokes up.
So, mistaken random free associations. No, I think from an educated guess, Japan's economy was consciously undermined decades and decades ago, especially in the 90s. There was a big fight amongst nationalists within Japan that didn't want to hollow out their once very powerful industrial economy in favor of some form of bankers' dictatorship centered in the city of London and Basel, right? But there was technocratic agents infused to take control of the Japanese central bank and undermine the Japanese Ministry of Finance. There's a documentary called The Princes of Yen, which is a great documentary that I highly recommend people watch. They can find it for free online. That goes through this whole sick story of how Japan was really consciously destroyed and turned into this speculative basket case. You know, like real estate in Japan in the Imperial Palace grounds. I was reading back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Was valued at something like 3 times the value of all of the real estate of California, the state where there's 39 million people that live. So that's just the tiny little Imperial Palace grounds of Japan. So speculation became what replaced the once competent business practices of the Japanese, as their younger economists, just like they were doing in Russia, were being given scholarships to be trained and brainwashed in Harvard and Yale or Oxford, and then sent back to become the new technocratic managers that would just do their own version of perestroika in a weird way in Japan, as far as mass privatizations, deregulation. And it resulted now in a situation where Japan has the biggest debt to GDP ratio in the world. It's like, I don't know, 230% or something of personal
it's ridiculous. I think it's more than that. I think that's like 5 years ago news. I think it's more than that. I think it's like 800%.
They have, right? So I wouldn't be surprised. It's sick. And they've just been doing quantitative easing out of the wazoo instead of actually doing what they should have done, imposing capital controls, you know, which is what a sovereign nation state should do. And then on top of that, now what seems to be one of the big triggers for the current debacle in Japan was the yen carry trade finally blowing up after years and years and years. You know what the yen carry trade was?
Nope. I was going to play along.
Basically,
pretend like I know, but you called me out on. You saw it.
I saw your eyebrow flinch a little bit. I was like,
right.
Basically, Japan was induced to lower their interest rates to abysmally like 0 or even negative interest rates for a long time. And so what speculators would do is they would just buy Japanese debt at 0 interest and then go and turn that into, they would basically convert that and purchase some other nation's debt that had whatever 2-3% interest, whatever, anything more than 0, and just make money out of thin air. And that was creating billions, if not trillions of dollars every single day of fake money just being registered as numbers on the books of various speculators. And thus it was being factored into global GDP, factored into the wealth of Japan, because now you have all of these speculators that want to buy your yen, but they don't care about your yen. They just care about making money by transforming their purchase of Japanese debt into something that is going to give them some more returns. So again, it was a hoax, but it was maintained for years and years and years. And it seems like that has finally, people they just stopped believing in it. So that kind of created it participated in the panic trigger that took down the stock exchanges to the degree that we've seen. So yeah, and there's more. I mean, there's so many other triggers, and I don't know if somebody's coordinated that with the shit show in the Middle East, where there's obviously itchy trigger fingers right now, left and right. They're gearing up for the big catalyzer that people have been like waiting to ejaculate over for decades. The final like bombing of Iran that so many Kabbalists and greater Israel fanatics just are dying for. Literally.
Did you know there's a song? I like to surprise people. Did you know that there's a song, Bomb Iran, from the 70s?
Bomb Iran.
Yep, that's the one. So you do know it. Good. I want to take a little break and thank everybody who is a patron and everybody who has bought me coffees, and remind everyone that you can buy me coffees and find the Patreon link in the description. I won't do the banner now, but I will play this. This also came up across my feed recently, and I wanted to run this by you, as one would
The real
say.
problem is not the high taxes themselves, but the fact they are not even really funding the government. So who's financing the government? Government is financed by...
I really hope that this music in the background doesn't give me a copyright strike on this video. I hate it when they do this stuff on these videos.
Treasury bonds. And who buys the
I can't
treasury
even hear the
bonds?
music.
Mostly the Fed. And how does the Fed buy them? By printing money. But what backing does the Fed have for that money being printed? The treasury bonds themselves. So basically, you finance the government by printing money out of thin air. Someone could ask, well, so if the government can print the limited amounts of money, why would they need taxes? The answer is simple, but it's very shocking. The real problem is that you pay high taxes only to uphold the illusion that you are funding the government, which you are not. The government is funded by money printing, paper backed with paper, a bubble that will inevitably burst.
That is basically the whole video, or all that I've got of it. Comments, thoughts?
Yeah, smart guy. That's it's surprising that somebody from that high level of political influence could come out and just speak so candidly about the facts. So
Right?
yeah, pretty good, pretty good. I'm impressed. He also kicked out the Jesuits a few months ago. He's one of the first leaders in decades of any country that actually had the balls to kick out the Jesuits. So that's also interesting for me. He's somebody I have to look a lot more into this dude. I've been so impressed so far by what I've seen. I think maybe he's a little bit weak on Austrian school economics. I don't know if I don't think he favors the idea of protectionism to promote the creation of national manufacturing or national banking, which I support those things. That's a big part of my philosophy. Is every sovereign country needs to be truly sovereign, control over a national bank that isn't run by private interests, and the right to utilize protectionism, protective tariffs to also defend your local economy from the international bankers. So I don't think he's for those things. So there's probably some differences I would have if I actually started digging more into the details of what he's trying to push as a replacement. But so far, I've been really enjoying his criticisms of the system for sure.
Yeah, he's definitely been that nail that sticks out and might get hammered in, as the Chinese would say, right? You know that Chinese saying, the nail that sticks out is the first to get hammered in?
Yes, I've heard that, yes.
Yes, I wouldn't be surprised that you've heard it. This is some short video. I haven't checked it yet. Money, how it gets created out of thin air. Let's see what they have to say.
The Federal Reserve produced a document entitled Modern Money Mechanics.
Oh, perfect. I was going to bring that up. I actually have it open in another tab. No, not here. Here we go. Modern Money Mechanics. For everybody who might not be aware, I think this is like a 1978 or something document from Congress, I believe, or the Senate. One of the two, and it explains modern money mechanics. Let's see what this video has to say.
Publication detailed the institutionalized practice of money creation as utilized by the Federal Reserve and the web of global commercial banks it supports. On the opening page, the document states its objective. The purpose of this booklet is to describe the basic process of money creation in a fractional reserve banking system. It then proceeds to describe this fractional reserve process through various
by the way, the PDF is free online.
Banking terminology, a translation of which goes something like this. The United States government decides it needs some money, so it calls up the Federal Reserve
and subscribers will know I studied economics. I'm an economics major. I didn't learn this in university. I learned it in my free time.
Requests say $10 billion. The Fed replies saying, sure, we'll buy $10 billion in government bonds from you. So the government takes some pieces of paper, paints some official-looking designs on them, and calls them treasury bonds. Then it puts a value on these bonds to the sum of $10 billion and sends them over to the Fed. In turn, the people at the Fed draw up a bunch of impressive pieces of paper themselves, only this time calling them Federal Reserve notes, also designating a value of $10 billion to the Fed. The Fed then takes these notes and trades them for the bonds. Once this exchange is complete, the government then takes the $10 billion in Federal Reserve notes and deposits it into a bank account. And upon this deposit, the paper notes officially become legal tender money, adding $10 billion to the U.S. money supply. And there it is. $10 billion in new money has been created. Of course, this example is a generalization, for, in reality,
you know this, but for people who might not know how their money is created, it's good to have a little bit of a visualization. Do you want to talk about the monster from Jekyll Island, I think it's called?
Well, yeah,
right?
we could do that. There's a bit of a nuance, though. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a bit of a nuance to keep in mind, though, that what was just described is not, in my research, is not intrinsically a bad thing unto itself. The idea of fractional reserve banking, for example, does not necessarily have to be a bad thing. The problem is when you have the agendas of international financiers, huh?
It's backed by nothing and produced in private state banks instead of actual state banks.
Yeah,
like the Fed is not federal.
If you actually have, and I think everybody watching this show knows at this point, I think in this sort of community, the idea of the privatization of central banking in America or in most of the countries of the world, except for just a few, is pretty well known. The story of Jekyll Island is an important one that was popularized by Ed. Oh, I'm forgetting his name, but there's enough literature that's gone public on this over the years, showcasing the famous meeting in New York on a very elite estate that was associated with the Sleepy Hollow Country Club, owned by William Rockefeller, which was sort of the hub of this fifth column deep state structure inside of the United States. I would even say since the American Revolution, the Sleepy Hollow zone, that's what Washington Irving is kind of subtly taking a jab at in his the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. He's basically calling out this evil occult agency represented by the leading families that had made their fortunes off of the opium wars, the opium smuggling campaigns, the slave trade, and here we're talking about the leading Lamonts, the what became later on the J.P. Morgan family, the Rockefellers were a little bit later on in the game that joined into this club, the Russell family that created Skull and Bones. So their base was Sleepy Hollow. This is also what created, like under Claude Dancy, the co-founder of MI6. He's the guy who came here for 3 years to wire America's new multi-headed hydra of intelligence under the FBI, the new income tax police, the secret policing operations, the black chamber at the U.S. military that became the NSA. That was all wired by Claude Dancy at Sleepy Hollow, and you had a network of these traders who set the stage in 1911 at this meeting in Jekyll Island for the creation of a central bank that would be privately run by the money power of the city of London and the top financier interests that they had running their fifth column in America. And their board of directors, part of the constitution of the Fed would be that they would be classified, so nobody would be allowed to see who's actually in the directorship, who are the owners of this private entity, which would have a little bit of overlap with the federal government, but only a little bit. So like the Congress would be allowed to ultimately appoint, a chairman of the Federal Reserve. There'd be a limited amount of collusion, but overall the idea would be that this private banking system would be independent of the pollution of the democratic process. And that became the ideal of all central banks, especially coming out of the Great Depression that was seeded by the Bank of International Settlements, was that private banking should be kept independent as a power unto itself. And this grouping ended up centralizing the central banks around the Bank of International Settlements, like I was mentioning, which was built up in 1930. As a way to help facilitate originally German debt repayments from World War I, but then it became something that became a global control mechanism overseeing the growth of and the international coordination of things like deregulation that gave rise to the era of globalization, the consumer society in America, the idea of structural adjustment loans to poor countries was all being coordinated by this centralized thing in Basel. So all that to say, the Federal Reserve, when I was saying that it's the activity we saw in that video is not intrinsically a bad thing, is that when you look at what an authentic national bank is supposed to be able to do, and at different times did do, and here I'm referring to the approach that Lincoln had taken with his greenbacks.
I was just going to say, when greenbacks actually existed and meant something, that the green was backed by gold, basically.
Yeah, but actually it was more fiat than gold. You'd be surprised. There was a gold reserve, but it wasn't a gold standard. So you had an allotment of gold within the treasury, and within various national banks that were seated around the Union. But there wasn't a one-to-one gold standard. So there's a difference between the gold reserve and the gold standard. A reserve is just sort of like everybody has to have a limited amount. It's kind of actually related to fractional reserve banking. The idea of a gold reserve or a silver reserve is that, okay, we'll have a limited amount of a metal within the bank coffers, but you can't just go and assume that there's a one-to-one metric of like somebody can turn in their paper dollar at any given time and get a certain quantity of gold for that paper dollar, because that would also be very easy to manufacture bank panics, bank runs, contraction of the money supply by those who control the sources of the gold mines. And gold and these precious metals largely have been monopolized by the private financier interests that we were just talking about, that controlled things like the British Empire, that had the control over the majority of mining interests in Africa, around the world, in South America. Even these private companies controlled those. So at that point, it's like, okay, if a country just completely ties the amount of money it can create to one of these precious metals that are themselves controlled by their enemies, well, their enemies have a huge advantage over the country and can plunge the economy by just manipulating the price of gold, manipulating the quantity of it, who gets it very easily. So the greenback system it had a gold reserve element, but you could print a lot more money than you had gold. But the idea that made that good, because it was also informed by certain precedents that had been already done in the United States coming out of the Great Depression, starting in the 1790s under Alexander Hamilton's genius. And Hamilton is one of these massively slandered individuals who was himself killed in 1804 by Aaron Burr. But what he did, and what was informing Lincoln's greenback, was the idea that the money that is purchased, so the money is issued through Article 1, Section 8 of the Congress, that authorizes the Congress and the Treasury to coin money and the price of money. It begins with a project. So you're like, okay, there's an infrastructure project. Let's say it's the Erie Canal. The Transcontinental Railway or whatever. There's a big project. It has to be done, but we don't have the money to do it. But we've got this potential. So that's going to require, let's say, a 5 to 10 year perspective to build it. It's going to require a number of capabilities that we currently don't have, since either the canal or the rail system or whatever has not yet been built. We don't have the manufacturing. We don't have the specialists. We don't have the engineering skills. We don't have the transportation to get things from the mines that are maybe not even developed into some processing facility to be turned into rail, to be then transported to the site, right? So there's the whole complex process of interconnectivity that involves secondary, tertiary sectors that involve the raw materials processing, the refining, but also services that then spring up in new cities that are then created to meet that new demand of higher earning workers that will emerge. New entrepreneurs will arise, right, who have the knowledge and the ambition to get the job done, to try to get a contract from the government to be a part of the building process. So the National Bank of Alexander Hamilton created this really great solution concept by first consolidating all of the disparate state debts of the 13 colonies coming out of the American Revolution. America was bankrupt beyond belief. The money was collapsing the way Japan's money is collapsing. Personal debt and national or state debts were out of the roof. The inflation was upwards of 400%. Nobody wanted to invest in America. It was like toxic, and there was no ability to have some form of harmonious action in the common good amongst the 13 colonies. Every colony had their own private small banks that were issuing their own currencies. There was no ability to have a protective tariff because everybody had their own right to control their own local mini economies. So there was no government revenue. You couldn't do much. And again, it was bankrupt, and you had no industry. So America was still primarily addicted to what the British Empire had kept America addicted to, which was a human labor intensive form of agrarian economy that was highly dependent upon slave labor that was brought there by the British since 1618 or whatever. So these were problems that were existential, and it was understood by people like Hamilton. Oh, I'm getting visually choppy. Is my sound still coming through?
No, you're good. Yeah, no, you're good here.
Okay. So the thing about Hamilton is, and people like Benjamin Franklin and John Jay and Gouverneur Morris and Robert Morse, who were very much closely collaborating with each other, is they understood that the way to get out of this involves creating a new system whereby wealth could be created in a very different way. So they first consolidated all.
Oh, does that mean that we lost Matt? That means that we might have lost Matt. Let's see if we can pause this and maybe come back to Matt. All right, and the recording should be, yes, the recording is back. And so is
Okay.
Matt, welcome back. I thought I was gonna have to end the show all by myself, and I felt really like lonely and bad. But yeah, you want to tell people how again? The second time
Right.
out of 3 recordings with you something happened.
Yeah, no, that's weird. There's something fishy going on between our. Yes, some poltergeist doesn't want us to have a full conversation. Well, no, it was weird. I lost power, but it came back on, so we'll get back on track. And I vaguely remember the point I was trying to draw out, which was this Hamiltonian system, which Abraham Lincoln and his advisors studied and applied, which allowed for the U.S. to survive its precarious early years, whereby it was understood that if they wouldn't solve those problems I just outlined, it was only a question of when they were going to be reabsorbed through economic warfare back under the control of the British Empire that they had like bled so much and sacrificed so much to break away from. So the solution concept is located specifically in something that no economics student or professor I have ever met has actually read, which is the 4 reports to Congress by Alexander Hamilton on his report on the subject of bank, on the creation of a national bank, the creation of credit, and on his report on the mint. And those 4 reports, and also his defense on the constitutionality of the national bank in opposition to Thomas Jefferson and the Jeffersonian Democrats that were then being dominated by the slave power of Virginia. They didn't want any of that stuff. They wanted to keep America agrarian. They said that if we allow for manufacturing, it's going to lead to corruption because technology causes corruption if we stay pure. So they were believers in the Rousseau noble savage garbage. That was also brainwashing a lot of the stupid people in France at the same time. And so Alexander Hamilton's reports are brilliant. They were largely acted upon. And with that, in the 1790s, there was like I was saying, the consolidation of the bankrupt state debts, the creation of a new federal debt. So there was a conversion of the debts into a new federal debt, but that new debt would be now tied to a new mandate. And the new mandate was thus tied, as Hamilton outlines, and as what was done, large-scale projects that would be self-liquidating. So he made a very clear differentiation of inflationary debts and anti-inflationary debts, good debts or bad debts. Not all debts are created equal, the way our current society has been brainwashed to believe a debt is a debt is a debt is a debt. No, it's not true, because some debts will be associated with, buying heroin and feeding your gambling problem, and other debts might be associated with putting your kid in college or taking out a loan on a tractor to be a more productive farmer, right? Like, so you can't say that those two debts are the same thing.
We mentioned that last time we talked, and the difference between the Chinese and the Western approach to helping Africa, quote unquote, and the way that the West structures loans versus how the Chinese have been conquering Africa. I mean, helping Africa grow.
Yeah, but the gist of it is correct. Yes, it's a very clear modern example of this theoretical idea, and it's clearly something anybody who's serious can just look at. How does China conduct its business affairs differently from us? Because they all use money, they all have similarities, they all use the word economy, except you get thrown in jail in China, if you try to do the types of activities you're trained to do from Harvard Business Management, or you try to engage in Wall Street speculating on derivatives, and by and large, that type of activity will get you thrown in jail in China, as it used to get people thrown in jail in saner times in the early 80s, like Michael Milken, the innovator of junk bond sales back in the early 80s. He got his ass thrown in jail, and then it was just a few more years that Alan Greenspan, an Ayn Randian, was brought in to normalize and legalize and expand the junk bond illegal activity of people like Milken, and that's what sort of was at the heart of the growth of the derivatives cancer starting in 88, 89. So that sort of thing is different. China has built 40,000 kilometers of high-speed rail. They got 5 magnetic levitation rail lines. They've pulled 1 billion people out of poverty, and they're like taking this type of practice to providing loans, as you just pointed out, for poor countries that have been abused for generations, but actually building things like we're seeing in Ethiopia with the Grand Renaissance Dam they're assisting with. You got rail systems connecting different African countries for the first time with common gauge electrified rail from Djibouti to Ethiopia that's going to cross all of Africa if it's not sabotaged, and Rwanda. They're giving it back. So, I mean, but it's not that they're angels. They just know that that's good business. It's like if you have healthier clients, the healthier clients will be able to give you better quality products that you can purchase for your domestic market. They will also be less inclined to want to destroy you because they feel no hostility. They feel grateful that they have a powerful but honest business partner next to them or close to them. They will buy more of your finished goods. So, if you have a longer living, higher quality African people, well, these are people who will be a bigger consumer market to purchase Chinese-made goods. So it's good business. And that used to be better understood by people like, again, when you look at this American system school of Lincoln, of Alexander Hamilton, of Henry Clay, Henry C. Carey. There's so many of these people who fought. Many of them died defending this constitutional banking system that involved protective tariffs, a focus on manufacturing, a balance of private interest and the public good that was being harmonized very, very well, I would say. All of American history can only be understood. The whole 260 years of its short life can only be understood as a battle by its arch nemesis of the British Empire and the hereditary families and clans of the royal nobilities that go back to the Roman Empire and before that, to destroy the emergence of that new system. And the way that they do it is they convert it into a tool for their own desire to enslave the masses. So the Federal Reserve has attributes on a mechanical level of a Hamiltonian national bank or a Lincoln Greenback model of system. But
that's like saying an electric car has attributes of gasoline engines.
Yeah.
Cars.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Has attributes. The fact that one is a little bit more bad for the environment, and I'm talking about the electric cars, is par for the course, as they say. I have a couple of other things that I want to pop up in front of you and get your reaction to. And I know you're in a hurry, and we had technical difficulties, so I'm guessing your time is even more constrained. I'm guessing you have about 7 minutes left, something like that, on and off.
Well,
How do you feel about all these accounting errors that have been popping up?
Oh, well, that's not a surprise anymore, right? I mean, the Pentagon, didn't they fail audits up to the scale of like $20 trillion or something? Like
you know what that reminds me? That reminds me of 8/11, that one year, or that one day before 9/11, when
right.
What was his name? Talked about some billions of dollars that were lost. What was his name? That guy?
Oh.
I can't remember.
Sorry, I'm just seeing here. The Pentagon this year failed the audit, or last year failed its audit for the 6th year in a row. And they're saying here 1,600 auditors conducted 700 site visits and assessed $3.8 trillion in assets and $4 trillion in liabilities associated with the Pentagon. And I'm trying to get the exact number, but I think it's something like $2 trillion or something crazy like that. Oh yeah, the Pentagon could not account for 63% of nearly $4 trillion in its assets. That's from the website Statecraft.
That's probably the like overt budget, not the black budget.
On top of that, right? If you factor that in.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, the money printer go brrr, as they say. This happened also. Well, not really, but it's about to happen. And that is the segue that I wanted to use into the events in the U.S. and the rise in attempted and real assassinations worldwide, or successful ones. What's your take on the temperature of the collapsing West and the lack of diplomatic, let's say, solution options in the world stage before World War III, which many of my guests think has already started?
Yeah, it's very concerning. We're living in very historic times. I know that there is this other tradition embedded within America that is good and viable, but it's been so long suppressed that it's hard to see how it could be revived at this late stage, as I call it, of imperial rot. But I do believe it's possible, and I do think that Trump did activate. His existence was only made possible by the fact that this tradition is so deeply embedded in the American psyche. This idea of looking out for America first, right? Just like caring about the actual health of the nation, trying to avoid entanglements into forever wars, trying to rein in to a certain degree speculative banking activities and instead direct it towards the buildup of manufacturing, utilizing protective tariffs. That I see Trump very much made a focus of his flushing of NAFTA, his revival of the protective tariff. For the first time in like 45 years, we haven't seen a fight for restoring protective tariffs. His calls for breaking up the banks via Glass-Steagall that he gave a few speeches on, his many speeches calling for the revival of Lincoln's policies and McKinley's policies, including in the recent Republican National Convention.
I have to interject a bit.
Yeah.
You're not new to politics, and I'm sure politicians say a lot of things before they get elected. So you're citing a lot of Trump's speeches, but speeches are one thing.
I'm saying what he did. No, I'm saying what he did. He flushed NAFTA. Like, he restored the right back in 2017-18. He brought back protective tariffs to build up.
Oh, okay. You're talking about before. Yeah. I got that.
Yeah. And then I'm saying that that was a consistent 4-year effort that he made with a lot of people within the Republican Party, as well as obviously more broadly working to undermine this left and right. The idea, even saying McKinley and trying to revoke McKinley's tariff in the current age is one of the most political things and dangerous things you can do, especially as a Republican, where in the Republican Party, the Austrian school of Friedrich von Hayek has become pretty much ubiquitous of libertarianism as the greatest good. Just like in the same sense that in the Democratic Party, Keynesianism has become the greatest good. Now, the sick joke is that both parties, when they didn't suck, and I'm talking here Democratic Party, you got to go way back to the days of John F. Kennedy or Franklin Roosevelt, when they were actually looking out for the interests of the people and the Constitution, or you got to go back to the days of McKinley or Harding for the Republican Party to find any examples, or Lincoln when it was actually still good. But in both cases, what made either one not suck were because they were acting upon this universal principle of national banking and the moral idea of the Constitution that some sense of moral values that are associated with the sacredness of the people and the nation has to govern the behavior of economics. That was present, and it wasn't Keynesian. Keynes he despised the Republic. He despised Roosevelt. John Maynard, Friedrich von Hayek was a lifelong friend of his. Both of them were supporters of world government. Friedrich von Hayek endorses world government at the end of his road to serfdom. And the Austrian school, especially in the 70s, was infused into the Republican Party, just as Keynesianism was infused over JFK's dead body into the Democratic Party. And both of them were in favor of effectively a restored form of a global fascist British Empire. In the case of von Hayek, he was of the Habsburg Austrian global empire, but they're run by the same families who always colluded together. And to this very day, that's what things like the Heritage Foundation, which has taken control of much of the Republican Party identity, has been driven by directly. It's a Fabian Society, Mont Pelerin Society operation embedded inside the United States. This is what Trump has been fighting, and I know that he has, because they're the ones who created Project 2025. It was a Heritage Foundation operation designed to undermine Trump's policy program that he endorsed, which is the official one called Agenda 47, which is entirely driven by the idea of restoring protective tariffs and manufacturing. The Project 2025 is designed to destroy that. It's a Trojan horse. So you've got this a lot of effort that I don't see why they would have made that effort either in Trump's first term or that I see now happening if he wasn't posing an actual threat to their power structure, or if he was just completely in on the game as controlled opposition. I don't see why they would have created all of these Trojan horses and efforts to undermine his policy orientation towards having good relations with Russia, with China. I even think even Iran, frankly, even though he used disgusting words, I don't even think that he was to blame for Soleimani's murder, even though he, again, used terrible language. I saw evidence after Soleimani was killed that this was an independent operation from the State Department, which he called the Deep State Department correctly, as an independent agency outside of the authorization of the executive branch. And he put a lot of work in communicating with the leadership of Iran in the days, even in the minutes after the killing of Soleimani, through the Swiss embassy in Tehran. And he had a direct channel. Yeah,
people who looked into it slightly after it happened probably know what you're talking about. But that is a good segue into the assassination attempt. Who do you think was behind it? Do you think it was the same Ukrainian people? Do you think it was Iran? Do you think it was the Democrats? Do you think it was China?
Okay, well, look,
I heard it was China, man.
I think one of the scenarios that they're going with right now is to get President Vance in. So I think one of the most effective ways of getting President Vance in and driving the people crazy is to amplify Trump's
vice president
status. No, President Vance. I'm saying that one of the most effective ways of getting that President Vance in play, who's a Palantir, I would say, puppet, who does want a war with Iran. I think he would really go for a war with Iran and with China. He's much more unhinged in that sense. But I think that most efficient way for him to do that.
This is the vet married to an Indian. This is the vet married to an Indian, right? We're talking about the same guy. The VP that Trump has now, supposedly.
Yes, that guy. Yeah, JD Vance. Yeah,
I'm just making sure that I'm on the same page as you. Yeah.
Yeah, and Whitney Webb has done some pretty good breakdowns of his Palantir controllers, which is one of the biggest military-industrial contractors in the world. They run the entire Five Eyes security apparatus infrastructure that's part of the broad surveillance dragnet. Elon Musk, as well as part of this.
The ones that keep turning off your internet every time we start recording.
It happens.
No, but not just now when you mentioned them, but it happened
they're the
earlier.
ones who turn off my internet. Yeah,
yes,
right.
Listen, I don't want to keep you too long, but I do want to get your take on another bit of news that came out.
Let me just finish the point there, because I am concerned that what they want to do is get him as president and the most effective way to do that and drive the people crazy who support Trump is to elevate Trump into a Jesus godlike Messiah status, which he's a man. He's a flawed man, but I think he's an honorable man despite that. And I don't think so. They want to do that on the one hand, but at the same time, I do perceive that it would be efficient if he were to win the elections to then eliminate him and immediately get their President Vance in play. That's my big concern, is that's in motion. I personally don't see, barring a vast amount of fraud, which they might still be able to do, another Democratic, like a Kamala Harris, or are they going to squeeze in Michelle Obama? I don't know. I don't see it working, but maybe. But that's my biggest concern, is that they want to revive this new Confederate libertarian empire, because we all could see what fascism looks like on the left, but it's difficult for many people of a conservative sort of bent to sort of recognize where the fascism has emerged on the right as well, because it's always played left hand, right hand, controlled opposition.
You mentioned,
yeah.
You mentioned Michael Obama, and it got me, it like reminded me of some of the topics that I've had talks about recently with other guests, and one of them brought to my attention that, or reminded me, I should say, that Bush, Barbara Bush, is also rumored to have been a man, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I stay away from those conversations. I just don't. Too much
the reason that I bring it up is because apparently it's also Crowley's son. Like Barbara, you don't know, huh? All right, because I was gonna use that as a segue to your president declaring himself. Is he a president in Canada? Is it President Trudeau? It is, right? Or is it Prime Minister?
No, it's a Prime Minister. No, look, I would say that it's possible. It's possible. I've seen, but there's just so much speculation that it's difficult for me to cut through, like, what is the false narratives versus something I can hold on to regarding George Bush's...
It's a comedy show. We're just joking.
No. It's serious stuff, because actually it's possible that Prescott Bush was himself the assistant of Nikola Tesla. And we talked about this in a past episode. Yeah. And Tesla was directly associated with one degree of separation with Aleister Crowley through his buddy George Sylvester the Rake, the Satanist poet, who was like the lifelong friend of Tesla. They practically lived together in the 5-star hotels, and there was a one of the assistants who was close to both.
Wait, I have to. So they were basically buddy like Epstein and Trump, huh? in that plane photo.
Well, in the plane photo, sure. I mean, but they were actually like living together. Like they were actually.
I'm joking. It's a comedy show, man. Take it easy. Oh, okay. Relax.
No, I don't know. But I'm serious. Like this is something which it does seem like Prescott Bush was involved directly in this, and there's I'm only beginning to look into this, which could feasibly lend some fuel to the fire of this crazy hypothesis that Barbara Bush is tied to Crowley, and maybe Bush Senior and Junior might be somehow related. If they were, it would be quite the failure, because Crowley was obsessed with creating the Antichrist and birthing one of these like blood children, moon children. This is what Roman Polanski also developed in his Rosemary's Baby story. But it's a real thing that they're obsessed with. Every single person of Crowley's stature is obsessed with making the Antichrist come into reality. That would be pretty failures. I mean, if you looked at the psychological profile, like the level of thinking of a George H.W. Bush.
Time out. What was Junior's nickname? What was Junior's nickname in Skull and Bones? Do you remember?
I don't know. No, what?
I can't remember off the top of my head. Maybe somebody can leave it in the comments and I'll send it back to you eventually. But I know that it was something epic, in the sense of like it would give more credence to the whole he was destroyer of worlds type of Antichrist type of, what you're saying, that Crowley was obsessed with birthing, so to say.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
We'll get into it when it surfaces in like 15-20 years. Do you want to comment on Trudeau being gay now as opposed to before, and Macron being gay now as opposed to before? Like officially? Is there anything you have to say on that subject?
There's nothing official, but I do think that they're both. They both have a lot in common with each other.
No, I think they've both come out recently, officially.
No, they didn't.
Really? It's just Russian propaganda on fake news Telegram?
It's just floating around. They didn't officially come out.
I don't know. I'd like to think that it's not as.
I know for a fact he likes definitely underage girls, and he settled out of court for like $2.3 million when he was a teacher in British Columbia with the family of one of the kids who was like in grade 8 or grade 9.
When was that?
I think it was right before he was shopped into the political realm, maybe 2003 or 2004.
You know, when I was in Canada, I had a gay friend, and he told me that like in Canada they have a saying, "Buy now, gay later." So that could be the story with Trudeau, right?
No, I mean it might just swing in all directions. I don't know. I probably does. Like his adoration for the gay community and the LGBTQXYZ community is over the top enthusiastic. Like it's one thing to be supportive of like drag queens and stuff, but to be that over the top like enthusiastic beyond reason is for me a big red alarm that he's probably
slightly
got some
satanic
in the closet. He's probably got a lot of dresses in the closet.
And maybe into some kind of ritual stuff too. This I came across: percentages of happening World War III, economic collapse, Civil War, nothing. What are the chances of something happening, or do you think it's a nothing burger and they're just keeping up the tensions?
No, we're in a systemic breakdown crisis. I think it's an epoch shifting period that we're in right now that only happens once every few dozen generations or few centuries. If not in this case, it might be millennial. It's pretty big. It's pretty big.
May you live in interesting times. The infamous Chinese curse. Anything that you want to mention before we call this a recording?
It's okay. No, I think we went through a lot to give people stuff to chew on. So hopefully your audience found this edifying.
My audience has really low standards. This is the worst comedy show on YouTube. So don't worry about it. Everything was perfect. Plus the technical difficulties are like a tradition. Matt, thank you again for stopping by. Everybody who stuck around to the end, thank you for sticking around. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Check out the links to Matt's Telegram and whatever else is in the description. And have a good one. Matt, see you soon.
Cheers.
Peace out.